Okay, so now we're on to part 3 of map building. This time we're going to add a feature where we can add a pin and an annotation to our map. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to bring up the same Xcode document that we've been working on, and I'm going to add a new view controller. Like we did before, we'll stick in a button again, and this will just allow us to go back. Of course, you've actually got to select the view controller before you can stick anything into it. So it'll be our back button. We'll create our segue by again control click and drag. We'll hit show. We'll put another button in our home page. This one we're going to call map with pin, and we'll get that to show there by control dragging it to the view controller you want to show. We'll hit show. And remember, because we want to add some coding in here, we have to add a new viewcontroller.swift file. So we go up to File, New File, Cocoa Touch Class. This one we're going to call it Map Pin View Controller. Remember, we need iPhone and Swift selected. Next, we'll just save it in the file. And now we've got the map pin view controller. Now we split our screen, and we'll want the map pin and our main storyboard, because remember we need to link them. So first of all, we click on the new view controller we've just built and assign it to our new map pin view controller, which is there. So now we've got it assigned. We of course also need to add in our map view kit. So let's just make that a bit smaller. We'll drag in our map view kit. Now I'm not going to drag it all the way down this time, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But I want to leave a little bit of a gap where we're going to stick a few other features. We're going to stick some text fields which we're going to be able to type into. So I'll put those in, as well as some labels. So I'll put a label in, and we'll call this label title. We'll put another label in, and we'll call this label info, and we'll add in 2 text fields for the users to enter in the title for each pin. We'll need to give them a bit of space to do that, and the information for each pin, and a little bit of space to do that. We'll probably need to increase the size a bit. You might as well go all the way across. Okay, so we've added in the labels and the text fields. If we run that, sometimes what happens is you'll add them in, but they won't appear properly on your actual device when you load it. And you can see that info's kind of disappeared off the side. I'll show you a quick way to fix that by clicking on the view controller. This bottom button here allows you to auto resolve your layout. And what we can do is go add missing constraints, and it will put in the constraints that it thinks is appropriate, and we'll run it again. Now sometimes it will get it wrong, and you'll have to play around with it. If you're not sure how to use the constraints, have a quick look at the video on setting constraints for the thing, and you can see that actually fits a lot better now with our view control. If you rotate it, it should rotate quite well, and that's the advantage of having those attributes all added in. So now we've got our view controller looking the way we want, we need to assign some bits and pieces. So we'll go back to our split screen, we'll bring up our map pin view controller. We need to assign these text fields that we've placed here. So click on the text field, again control drag up to our our view controller.swift file. drop it in. This time we're just doing an outlet, and we're going to call this one title, and we'll call this one info. And we'll be able to refer to those at a later date. Now, why is it not liking title? Because title conflicts with another term, so we might have to call it something else. So we'll delete that one. We'll go back to title, and we'll call this one titles. And that should be a separate name enough, because sometimes if you try and call it by a name that it will reference another method or something like that, it comes up with an error. Now what we need to do is add in all the code that we did for our previous one. So I'm going to bring up our map view controller, and these were all the bits and pieces that we put in to basically just set our map up, and we're going to stick those back in our view did load. Just copy and paste them in. Now lots of errors will come up in just a second because we haven't imported our map kit, which we need to do with each view controller that uses the map. So import map kit, and that should get a lot of these errors to disappear, but my map hasn't been set, so we need to go back to our map view controller storyboard, our main storyboard, sorry, and this is our map. We need to create an instance of it over here. Now we're going to call it my map to stick with the convention we've done before. And what we should have now, that will now disappear, we should be able to run it and get the map appearing at our set locations yet again. So all we've done is just stolen the code from that first lesson. Again, if you're not sure on that, go back to lesson 1 with maps. So we've got our map appearing. What we now want to have happen is the user to be able to select an area, click on it, and a pin appear with information that they would like to store about that particular area. So let's just quit that. To do that, we need to add in a few things. First of all, it's recognizing the user's long click on the screen, and that's what's known as a long press gesture. So we're going to do that just in here. We're going to create a variable, and we're going to say let long press equal a UI long press gesture recognizer, and you need to add a target and an action or a selector with that one, and this one initializes when someone does a long press and then sets an action. So the target is going to be self, and the action is going to be whatever we want to call it, but we're just going to call it action. You need to have a colon after this, and I'll explain why in a minute, and then close that off. That becomes a string, and we close our brackets off. And what that means is this just basically creates something called long press, which recognizes a long press on our iPhone app and then calls this action. And in this case, we're calling a function called action, and you can call it whatever you want to, but we're going to call it action. What we now need to do is actually code the function that we've just called. So we're going to make a new function, and we're going to call it action, and we will then add a gesture recognition, gesture recognizer colon. So this will bring in that, and we're going to give it a UI gesture recognizer, and then close that off. So we've created a function that is sent a UI gesture recognizer, and then we'll put our code in, and this will be called whenever the user presses on the screen for a long period of time. I'll just put this onto full screen so you can see it a little bit clearer. So we're currently in map pin, and we're making this new function that gets called when someone hits a long press. We need to add a few little bits of information onto this variable that we've just created, long press. We need to set long press, the time that we need to recognize it. So minimum press duration. We're going to set this to 2. Again, you can edit this one to change how quickly the press needs to be for it to set a pin. And we're going to map dot add a gesture recognition. So we're going to now add our gesture recognizer to our map, and the one we need to add is the one we've just created, long press. So what this bit of data does is this creates this long press recognizer, sets the time, so it needs to be 2 seconds of holding down the key before it will try and do a pin, and then it adds it to our map. What we've got down here is our function of what happens when that long press is actually pressed. And what we're going to do here is add a few more variables. So we're going to create a variable var. This one's called touch point. And this one is a gesture recognizer dot location in view, and then we're going to set that to self.mymap. And basically all that does is add a touch point, which is a gesture recognizer. It basically says where does the person touch the screen in our map. We're going to add another one called new coordinates, and this is going to be of type CL location coordinate 2D, and we're going to set that to mymap dot convert point. And there's lots of these convert point ones. We want the one which sends a point and is 2 coordinate from view. So you want to select the correct one there. The point we're going to send it, in this case, is touch point, the one we just created, and the UI view is self.mymap. And we close off that. And this might sound a bit confusing, but these are all things we need to add in so we can access the location the person's put and then stick it on the pin we want. And we're going to add another variable, annotation equals, this one is an MK point annotation, and we are going to then add in a couple of other variables. We're going to have a variable called titled, and we're going to make that equal to the information we get from our user, and that's from the text field. Titles was our text field dot text. So what that does is it creates a variable and stores it, and this is the variable that the user entered. We're going to make another one which will be var. This one's going to be info. We'll just make that up and we'll equal. This is from our info text field dot text, and these two variables are now the bits of information that the user types in. So we've got titled and infos. We then need to use that information to make our annotation. So we've got annotation dot coordinate. Now basically this is just setting the coordinates of our annotation, and we need to set it to our new coordinates, which is where we got that touch point from. We also need to add in our new title and our new subtitle. So annotations dot title equals titled, which was what we got from our text field, and annotations dot subtitle equals infos, which was the information for our subtitle. So we've now created that annotation, we've got the location for where the touch was, now we needed to add it to our map. So we go back to my map dot add annotation, and we then add in our annotation. What we should get is that created. So we'll see if that runs, and we'll see if we can then add in our pins. Okay, so click on that. Now let's just say, oh, that's not very helpful at the moment. Toggle that keyboard off at the moment for this stage. Obviously that's an error that will color up your text fields, and I'll tell you how to get rid of that. You can look that up on dismissing keyboard video will tell you how to get rid of that when you hit return. Otherwise you'll notice that your text field actually ends up disappearing. So let's give these guys a title. Let's say home, or let's go office. Delete that, and we'll say where I work. And if we add that in, I'll just pick a random place, hold it down for 2 seconds, and we get our pin. If we click on our pin, we get our information. Office, where I work. Let's say another one, gym, where I work out, and let's say that's up here. Click on it for more than 2 seconds and we get our other pin, and we click on that, and it's where I work out. And you can set your pins to whatever you wish. Each time you click though, it will just add whatever's there. So this one has added another gym where I work out, and over here another gym where I work out. Now I now have 3 gyms that I work out at. Obviously whenever you add a new pin, you need to add a new title and new information about that title. But that's how you add an annotated pin to your map view. And that takes us to the end of dealing with maps at this point anyway.